Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off another slice of news. Should private citizens, people just like you and me, be able to sue to protect against racial profiling in voting? That's one of the questions that's going to be put in front of the Supreme Court very soon. The question now is, should Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act be something that people should be able to sue for and not just governments? According to a recent Court of Appeals ruling that said that only the government is able to sue to enforce Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, it will be put to the Supreme Court to decide to uphold that ruling, stripping private citizens of that ability, or to strike it down. Unfortunately, I think given the propensity of the Supreme Court to fall along conservative lines, I think the chances are probably pretty good that they are going to uphold that Court of Appeals ruling and say that no, people cannot do that and only the government can. And of course, given the fact that the government is in this case not going to protect the rights of its citizens to be protected against racial profiling when it comes to voting, I'm not holding my breath for them to do the right thing. Now, I also have no doubt that when this does come in front of the Supreme Court, the liberal judges will probably have a pretty strongly worded dissenting opinion. But as the court is majority very white, very conservative, and not very in line with the rights of anyone who is not white and conservative, I don't think we're going to see the right decision come to pass from the Supreme Court. Now, it is also possible that it will go neither of those ways, and they will in fact just put it back down to the lower courts to decide, skirting any sort of responsibility to rule on it one way or the other. As it stands, the federal government doesn't seem to want to pursue those racial profiling cases, and it is very likely that they do not have the resources to do so, even if they did want to. So even in a future Democrat majority government, they would not be able to pursue all of the necessary cases. So in practice, this would be essentially a permanent stripping of the right to vote for many non-white citizens. The right to vote has been under attack for quite some time at this point, although seemingly only if you're not white and wanting to vote for someone who is not a Republican. But this would no doubt be a serious blow to that right for all citizens. And the fight to get the Voting Rights Act passed in the first place was long and hard. The fight lasted for so long, and to see it potentially eroded in this way is an affront to everyone who fought for it and all the hard-won victories that came when it was eventually passed. The highest court in the land has a chance to do something important, which is to affirm the rights of all citizens, regardless of race, have the right to have their vote counted and have their voice heard in government. But the Supreme Court is really just another arm of the Donald Trump power structure and will likely not rule that the Eighth Circuit Court's ruling is not to be upheld. It would be disappointing for them to rule that way, but sadly it would be expected at this point because they do nothing that does not benefit the Republican majority and do not have the country's best interest in mind. Crippling the ability for non-white people to vote is part of their agenda because those are people who vote historically very much on the Democrat side and do not vote Republican. And if the Supreme Court upholds this lower court decision, it would be one of the greatest rollbacks of voting rights in over a decade, and all too easily opens the door for even further erosion of all of our rights to vote, regardless of skin color. And it would do irreparable damage to the fabric of equality in which our country is supposedly founded upon. For 60 years, all citizens, regardless of race, were able to all have their votes counted equally. And it was that equality that gave us strength as a nation, because it felt like finally we could all cast our votes and they could all be counted as one. And losing that would be a great national shame. And what's worse is that they're not being cartoonishly villainous and just saying all non-whites don't have the right to vote. They're just making it more difficult for people who have become disenfranchised and been discriminated against because of their race to file suits protecting that right. They say, oh, just let the government handle it, knowing full well that the government simply cannot handle the volume of cases. As it stands, over 85% of Section 2 cases in the last 40 plus years have been brought by private plaintiffs. The federal government simply is not equipped to handle that kind of volume. So it's crippling it without overtly crippling it, which in some ways is the most insidious thing of all, since it's in essence letting the wheels stop themselves by sheer volume, making it impossible to deal with it all. And so many who are being discriminated against simply will not get justice because it's too long of a line for them to get what they need. So I'd love to live in a world where the Supreme Court strikes down this Eighth Circuit judgment, but I don't think we live in that world. And I anticipate very much next month when the case is put before them, they will rule in favor of the lower court and uphold the decision, saying that only the government will be able to put cases of this nature before the court, and it will stymie many people's attempts to get justice and their right to vote returned to them. To say people's faith in the Supreme Court has been eroded to a point of non-existence seems almost something that goes without saying, but it is potential rulings like this that really hammer home the fact that the Supreme Court does not protect all of us equally. And while they may be the highest court in the land, they don't seem to collectively have the best interests of all Americans in mind. The modern Supreme Court feels a lot more like the white supremacy Supreme Court at this point, since they rule so frequently in ways that seem to hurt those who are not white and in favor of those who are. And if this seeming trend continues, it may not be long before interracial marriage is once again not legal, something that Justice Thomas may actually be looking forward to at this point. Which is not to say I'm not willing to be surprised and they do something that is unexpected and actually don't affirm this ruling, but I don't get the impression there's any reason to believe that they won't. So it does seem like a foregone conclusion that the Voting Rights Act is yet again going to have another piece chipped off of it in the next few weeks. And another victory for those who want to keep non-white voters suppressed and their voices silenced. It may not be a foregone conclusion, but it certainly feels like one. Keeping the right to vote open for all citizens is vital to our democracy, and seeing it diminish is yet another sign of our slow decline into authoritarian rule, which is sadly what a lot of people seem to want. So I guess 60 years was a good run for the Voting Rights Act, but we deserved longer, and maybe we will. I want very much to believe that. Well, that's it for this episode of A Slice of News, and until next time, I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and I'll cut you off another slice of news.